Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for having us here today. As you say, we're going to be talking about cooperative ecosystems and the evolution of trust. And what I really wanted to talk to was, I'm part of the founding team at IOTICS. I have Sophie with me, who's our head of customer success and is here largely to keep me honest, make sure that I get the details right, and correct me anytime I amble off topic. But really, for me, I wanted to say, where does this come from? And this actually comes from the Flourishing Systems paper that the CDBB published a few years ago, and talked about a platform for human flourishing. And why now? Because we must, and because we now can. And the two takeaways for this, for me, were about the fact that the technology now exists to make systems-based thinking and action possible. So this idea that the technology is here and that action is possible. So what is the technology that makes it possible? So for the moonshot, with my little JFK image there and getting to the moon, it was things like Margaret Hamilton's code. But for us and for all of us on the call, I'm sure it's about digital twins. And so for us at IOTICS, it starts with federated secure interactions between twins in evolving cooperative ecosystems. And I'll come back to the cooperative bit in just a second. But fundamentally, and we are by no means unique in this, these are words taken from some workshops with the BSI and others recently, and I know that the work the Digital Twin Hub is doing and the conversations happening around it all very much aligned. But twins have a decentralized ID, they have some semantic metadata about them, what they are, where they are, who owns them. They have dynamic data feeds. This is about right time stuff and the sharing of data. They have metadata that describes that data and says, this is what I'm sharing, these are my values. And then they have behavior that allows them to interact and bring static and dynamic data together. And then the ecosystems pieces, and this is where we start to get into the cooperative piece for me. So data owners have their own spaces. The thing about ecosystems is it isn't giving up stuff. It isn't giving it to someone else. It's allowing that interoperability to happen. And that's key to the foundation of trust. It's your data. You retain it, you own it. And then brokering interactions between those spaces, either in or across them. And so a key consideration in all of this is that we often hear cooperation and collaboration being used as synonyms, essentially. And for me and for the evolution of trust, it's vital that they are recognized as different. Collaboration is everyone coming together and agreeing not only on shared goals, but how they're going to work together and how they're going to do that and what they're going to do, and working as one towards a common a shared goal and a shared set of objectives. Cooperation is establishing that you might have a shared vision of what good is, but you're all going to get there at different times, you're going to do different things, and you have your own concerns and profit and loss. One of the things that Sophie often talks about in collaborative research projects is actually that you need to think about them in terms of cooperative. Everyone has their own ambitions. It needs to work for each of the individuals as well as the collective. And that's a key part of how the trust that we're going to talk to evolves. But these things don't happen overnight. Just as we didn't go to the moon and the Apollo missions didn't work in one piece, we had to start with Mercury and we had to learn. And again, part of the evolution of trust and part of what we're doing is saying that just start, begin the process, see how it evolves, and develop that trust in each other and in the underlying technology that ultimately drives the action. It's the action that's important. So we're going to use an example. This is working with Rolls-Royce Power Systems, and they started with a purpose. They had this challenge that when their trains and their assets broke down, their customer service people were checking 9 internal systems. Well, what they realized was they didn't see their products the way their customers do. They saw it as this series of silos that their engines, their assets went through. But what their customer saw was the end result. I don't care about your internal systems, I care about my piece. And they realized that digital twins were an ideal way of looking at this. They could take all of their pre-existing data, they could have their space, they could integrate into it, and they could create those asset twins of their engines, the 1600 power packs. And then they could deliver that to their pre-existing Go Manage system, which is their customer service managed piece. But that's a trusted network. I mean, they're their sources. They might be siloed and they might be separate. They might be siloed data. They might be functionally siloed. But ultimately, it's their systems. What they're creating is a single gateway to truth. So ultimately, they have twins interacting, and that's great. And they can start to appreciate the value that twins bring, and they can start to appreciate and trust in the notion that you can leave the data where it is. You can describe it with metadata, going back to those starting premises, and then you can bring it together and develop real insights in your pre-existing system. But ultimately, as we see there, there's only one space. There's only one bit. Where's the ecosystem? Well, that's how they evolved. Once you start seeing how it works inside, you can start thinking about how it works across boundaries. You can start with confidence saying, hold on, we created a digital twin of our propulsion system, but actually how much more value would our customers gain if we could share and exchange data across those boundaries, if we could start to build twins of entire ecosystems. But again, they don't happen overnight because you have to take everyone with you. And this is a key part for us about the evolution of trust. It's not just trust in the technology. It's not just trust in the data. It's the human aspect of trust. It's that point of saying, I know this data won't be weaponized against me. I'm not going to share something with you that you then come back to beat me with at a later date or hold me accountable on or create problems for me fundamentally. This is about saying we are sharing this and it's mutually beneficial. Well, so suddenly what you start saying is what they started doing was sharing. They started doing an open world approach of saying we can actually bring data from Hitachi and GWR and make it more than the sum of our parts. We can get those digital twins of our assets and the trains to come together. And for the very first time, we can start creating these views, these organizational views of data that previously weren't possible. And I'll put up a case study on the Digital Twin Hub of this in more detail, because obviously we don't have a lot of time this morning. But fundamentally, this allowed them to start synthesizing information that no one party knew by bringing together knowledge about where the train was from all those systems that Rolls-Royce had brought together, and information from GWR, and information from Hitachi that made the trains that ran them, and contextual information. What was going with air quality? What's the weather conditions? They can start generating insights about individual assets traveling through time. They've gone from a single asset view to suddenly being able to see assets of entire systems and trains and so on. Effectively, you're talking about multi-party data exchange. And we're starting to see the emergence of these spaces. We created a Met Office space. Anyone can go and have a look at the pieces that are in there. Same with atmosphere monitoring, which does the pollen count. Yeah. But it's still not quite there, because what we had to see is we had to start showing the value to Hitachi, showing the value to GWR, showing the value to the partners in the system so they could start seeing how it came together. And that's really the final piece for me about evolving trust, is starting to evolve from cooperation to coopetition. And I apologize in advance for the word. We didn't make it up. It's one out there. It's not a very nice term. It's difficult to say. But it's this idea about actually, if you can create shared rules, if we can create a shared understanding, we can compete on the game. Is Messi the best football player in the world? Well, it depends what you describe as the rules of football. It's important we get there. And that's the point at which we will have truly evolving systems, because then you're talking about trustless networks, because we don't get to the systems of systems view by making everything open. People don't trust in that. They're worried about the weaponizing of data. We're evolving that concept further now. We're starting to say it's about sharing data at different levels of security. I'm comfortable sharing this with Peter. I'm comfortable sharing this with Sophie. I'm comfortable sharing this with Jane. Some with it all, some not. And at that point, what we're really saying is that then you can start to deliver real, secure, evolving ecosystems. Multiple spaces coming together with real dynamic information described as digital twins, where everyone has seen the value as it builds. And suddenly what we're saying is you can take things that were developed in isolation, bring them together and really benefit from the overarching view of an evolving ecosystem where there is trust in what we're doing, but doesn't require the universal trust of a single network.